So we're on the fourth week of our study in the Beatitudes. And this week we're on Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God, and blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. That's what we're up to this week. One more week next week to finish the last two off. And as I've been trying to do over these last few weeks is to go into what some of the words actually mean in this group of sayings that Jesus gave on the lakes of Galilee. Because lots of the words that were used by Jesus have got slightly different meanings today than what they had in Jesus' day. We need to connect the two so we fully understand what Jesus is talking about. So the first thing we're going to look at this morning is, what does heart mean? Because that meant something different to the people of Jesus' day to what it means today. And even in our own language, heart has got several different meanings. The people of Jesus' day didn't understand our bodies as we do. They didn't understand what the heart did. But they certainly meant and knew that Jesus was talking about the heart of our being. We might talk about that today as our personality. Jesus is talking about our personality. What we are actually like, which is quite simple, I suppose, to us, but would have had no understanding in Jesus' day. But people knew then that people's character had to do with the cleanliness of their life, how closely they knew and followed God. In Jewish life, purification was very much something of the day, and people knew that they need to be purified before they could come before the living God. So, Jesus meant the heart of our being, which motivates our emotions, our actions, our manners, our attitudes, our thoughts, our feelings, and our personality. Not the organ that pumps the blood around our bodies and keeps us alive, as Trevor will know only too well. And of course, when we lose our blood, like the people of Westminster this week, sadly, life is no longer for them. So what about the blessed are the pure in heart then? The pure in heart. The Proverbs remind us that he who loves a pure heart and whose speech is gracious will have the king for his friend. This sixth beatitude, Jesus is talking about the core of human life, the heart, that needed to be pure and cleansed. Observing cleanliness in the Jewish world was at the height of their daily living. The Pharisees were always talking about it, preaching about it. And we're always excluding people from the worship of God because they weren't pure. They weren't following the purity regulations. But Jesus comes along and, like everything he does, he redefines the religious teaching of the day. Jesus is all about keeping up what the Old Testament taught. but he's trying to add a sensible meaning to what was understood. The psalmist says, "Who may ascend the hill of the Lord? Who may stand in this holy place? He who has a clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to an idol or swear by what is false. He will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from God his Saviour." Because in that sense, as I go back to my charts, pure has got a couple of definitions that we need to do. There's pure and innocent and pure and clean, besides a few other little excursions in the Greek. And in this case, very much so, Jesus is talking about pure and clean. Katharos in Greek. It's talking about being free from guilt. That's the sense that Jesus was trying to bring that. Not having washed your hands so their hands weren't dirty, but talking about having a cleanliness from the guilt that we have. Of course, everybody in Jesus' time knew that you could cleanse things in various ways. Metals, weren't they? Were heated up to purify them. And then we had something that was pure. And that's something of the emphasis of this word that Jesus uses. And again, in our English language, it's got several meanings. And it's quite unique that as you go through the Oxford Dictionary of meanings of these various words in the Beatitudes, that the nearest to the meaning we do is never listed at number 1 in the Oxford Dictionary. Because the number 1 in the Oxford Dictionary, when you look at pure, is talking about not mixing metals, which has got nothing to do with what Jesus was talking about. He's talking about being free from guilt, and then you will have the blessings that Jesus was talking about. You see, the Old Testament teaching recognised a close link between outer cleanliness and inner purity. But in the New Testament, it especially emphasises the place on inner purity resulting from spiritual renewal, far more than whatever was being taught in Jesus' day. Blessed are the pure of heart, because they will see God. One of Jesus' favourite sayings, isn't it? He said this more than once, and it's recorded in most of the Gospels. No good tree bears bad fruit, nor does a bad tree bear good fruit. Each tree is recognised by its own fruit. People do not pick figs from thorn bushes or grapes from briars. Good people bring good things out of the good stored up in their heart, and evil people bring good things out of the evil stored up in their heart. For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. This is key to our understanding of what Jesus meant by blessed are the pure in heart. Jesus associated the fact that we couldn't have two split personalities. We couldn't have a side of us that was not morally pure and right with the love of God. That's what he was really on about. And he recognised that we can often put on faces. And the person we are, we don't really project to those around us. But we have a secret life. And we all know about this, isn't it? How many people get convicted of pornography with children who we would never guess or suspect that are involved, or involved with sexual immorality. We've had some very public cases over these past few years of some of the icons of our society being convicted of child abuse. And yet, for years, they've been able to cover up what was really happening in their heart. They had a heart to abuse and corrupt children, but their public face showed a different side of them. And so we need to remember that our heart, our real heart, what we really think, what we really mean, really what we want to aim for in life, how we want to really talk to people must be the same. That is the heart that God can see, not the heart of those around us who can see. In Jesus' day, people got mixed up with believing that they were pure in heart because they went through the rituals of ceremonial washing before worship, and when they got in contact with a dead body, they went through the rituals of washing so everybody knew they purified themselves. But this is not what Jesus is on about, is it? Jesus is talking about a purity of thoughts, a purity of that life that no one else sees, that purity that only comes when we really love God and really want to serve him and worship him in a trueness that he knows about. I was never into Dr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde books or movies. I don't know about you. They were never very interesting to me. But we all know the scenario, the genre of the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He was able to change character. He took a potion. One minute he was an outstanding doctor, well known in society, and then through taking drugs he turned into a common criminal intent in wreaking havoc in his community. And of course that is the situation if our hearts are not clear. The rottenness of our character, our personality, will always overtake the good if we're not careful. If we're delving into things that are damping our pure heart, the badness will take over the goodness, and in God's eyes he sees no goodness, only the dark side of our personality. I like this quote from N.T. Wright. "Blessed are the pure in heart. How people will believe that? How will people believe that unless we ourselves are worshipping and living God until our own hearts are set on fire and scorched through with his purity?" Certainly a good thought to take. So what does it mean? They shall see God. Are we clear on what this understanding of this is? Well, we recognise we can't actually see the face of God, and people in Jesus' day didn't even want to seek the face of God because they thought they might die. We recognise that since Jesus came and died for our sins and invited us into the family of God, we can know and, I believe, see God. We don't see him in physical form, but we see him through relationships. Between that relationship we have when God is very real to us, when he's our friend and confidant. We don't see God if we're frightened of him, if we don't want to avoid those sides of us that we know he sees and we are not willing to deal with it. We see God when our relationship with him is very personal, not abstract. We can also see God, can't we, in the creation around us. We can see God in other people when he's working in their lives. We can see him in everyday events of our life. Like on Wednesday, when the terrorist was set on wreaking havoc and causing devastation, others put their life on the line to treat those who have been so cruelly injured. That's God at work in people. The ones that run to help the injured despite the danger. We see God at work in the miracles of life and bringing help. I love that little cameo on the news this week of the 4-year-old that got onto emergency services when their mother collapsed and was unconscious. Did you see that on the news? Lovely conversation. 4-year-old twins. Mummy had obviously collapsed for some reason, and they knew she wasn't wrong, and they got hold of Mum's iPhone, and they got hold of her finger and pressed it on the spot to open her iPhone up, and then asked Siri to get them help. And Siri called 999. And then there's this lovely little conversation with the emergency operator and these 4-year-old boys. It must be on YouTube by now. Have a look at it up. Absolutely wonderful. Clear. You know, Mummy's dead. We need help. And the operator saying, go and shake her. Yeah, we're shaking her, and you could hear them shaking her. No, she's not opening her eyes. And help comes, and Mum's treated and all's well. That's God at work. Any day, nobody will be able to convince me otherwise. And Jesus says that those who've got a pure heart and their personality reflects what they really are like to everybody, will see God. And I've no doubt that that is true. So, a pure heart produces good actions. An impure heart produces bad actions. Surely we can recognise that in others, but we need to recognise it in ourselves and deal with anything in our lives that we know is impure in God's sight. Seeking forgiveness and seeking to change our ways, and then we will see God much more clearly. Well, the next bit is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. The 7th Beatitude focuses on peacemakers. The theme of peace permeates through the scriptures. Peace that is a completeness of security and assuranceness in our spirits and souls. The zealots of Jesus' time attempted to bring back self-rule through guerrilla war tactics, etc., to divide and conquer the population of Israel. The leaders of the Jewish community were content in drawing divisions in their own society. None of them were really peacemakers in the full sense of the word. Peacemakers very much are those whose feet are trying to bring good news, to proclaim peace, to bring good tidings, to proclaim salvation, who say to Zion, our God reigns. And we remember very much that all came true when the prophet proclaimed, for there is a child is born, to a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. Jesus is our Prince of Peace. He came into this world to bring peace. One of the books I'm reading for this series is J. John's book on the Beatitudes, and I like this saying of his. Is peace simply the absence of something nasty happen? Such a definition of peace is essentially negative, like defining love as the absence of antagonism. Wishing or praying for peace surely means a hope for more than merely that the bombing or the shouting will stop. The mere ending of pain, hostilities or unpleasantness or whatever sort just signals the beginning of peace. Just as there's more to swimming than not drowning, more to good health than not being ill, more to life than just surviving, so we know there must be more to peace than nothing bad happening. We may talk about peace when the kids are at school, or off with the grandparents, or what have you, and we can have a little time for ourselves, but that's not real peace. Peace is not happens when the boss is not in the office for the day, or when the mother-in-law is not visiting, or when the noise stops, when the shouting's died down. Peace, that's not real peace. Real peace is not an imposed peace. Real peace is not when the troublemaker has been arrested or the ASBO's now in force. History reminds us that peace needs to be real. Donald Guthrie says this: peace is an active, not a passive force. In other words, peace just doesn't occur when nothing else is happening. And we need to remember that. Peace is something that we all crave after, I suggest. But we need to recognise that peace is more. It's when people are acting as peacemakers. We desperately need peacemakers in the world. Not just on the world stage or the local stage, but we need peacemakers in our offices, in our schools, in our communities, in our churches, may I say, in our families. If you've got somebody in your family who's the peacemaker, they certainly are very important parts of our lives. And peacemakers come from different areas, don't they? Peace can't be a compromised peace that we had, in 1938. Peace has got to be real, alive, active and true. Peace can't be people pronouncing peace on the wireless or the radio and bringing bits of paper to say peace. More than that. Of course, this week also we've had the death of one of the peacemakers of the last couple of decades, haven't we? Martin McGuinness. A very divisive figure in the sense of Northern Ireland politics. He was a terrorist. No one ever denied that. He never denied that. But he became a peacemaker and became one of the most influential people in British politics and died this last week. Very interesting that. I like what Ian Paisley Jr. said about him. Ian Paisley Jr. said, as a Christian, we are judged not by how we begin life, but how we finish. And that is so true today. It's not how we begin, it's how we finish. I was reading an article from Peter Linus, who's the director of the Evangelical Alliance of Northern Ireland, who went to Martin McGuinness's funeral. He said when the death was announced, he thought, well, should I go to the funeral? Because he was in London at the time, and he thought, well, it's only going to be in a couple of days' time. Perhaps I'll give that a miss. And then he had a personal email from Martin McGuinness's wife asking him if he would be good enough to come to the funeral and say a few words. He felt he couldn't refuse, and so he didn't, and he went along with faith leaders from all denominations that are active in Northern Ireland. I think one of the most memorable things for me is how on earth he ever got on with the Reverend Ian Paisley, because I think I would have struggled to get on with the Reverend Ian Paisley. But Peter Linus says this: they got on together because they prayed together. Now that's something, isn't it? People from two very different aspects of life came together and brought in a peace to Northern Ireland that has lasted. And I dare say that peace only came because Martin McGuinness was an actual terrorist and they could actually sell it to his fellow terrorists. But he did have a different aspect on life. God cries out for peacemakers, and peacemakers will know the blessing of God. They will be called children of God. Be careful, some of our translations, I think, say to this that they will be called sons of God. I think that can be a bit misleading. I don't think that's helpful to understand what Jesus was saying. Jesus was talking about family in this case. Peacemakers will become part of God's family, and we need to remember that. Another great peacemaker was this man, Mahatma Gandhi. Not a Christian, but certainly a peacemaker. Let's listen to a clip from the film Gandhi. When Christians step back from being peacemakers, God calls on others to be peacemakers. For they will be called children of God. Jesus turns aside the various political, religious and militaristic attempts of those within Israel to establish their supremacy, calling on the people to be peacemakers in their own families and communities. We've been created, I believe, to be people that are peacemakers, not people who constantly want to cause divisions in our society. Jesus brings about the kingdom of heaven, believing that through his peacemaking teaching, all will be able to enter that kingdom of heaven because they become children of God. Scripture reminds us that very much that Messiah would be a man of peace. And indeed he was a man of peace. He was somebody who turned the other cheek. He was somebody who wanted to change the world peacefully. And of course he calls on us all to do the same. In our culture, peacemaking doesn't have a high calling. Despite the need in this world for us all to be peacemakers. But as children of God, Jesus asked us to be people of peace. And we will become children of God. I end with this verse from one of John's letters. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we have has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. All who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. Through the love we have for God, be a peacemaker. Next week we'll finish off this with blessed are those who are persecuted and blessed are those who are insulted.